Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human research vessel Horizon's Edge and watched the stars through the main screen. His ship had been exploring the Outer Rim territories for 6 months now, and they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. The crew was getting restless, and supplies were running low, but Jake knew they had to keep searching. Earth needed to know what was out there in the dark. Dr. Lisa Hayes worked at her station in the science lab below the bridge. She was the ship's best expert on alien life and languages, even though they had never found any aliens to study. Lisa spent her days scanning radio signals from deep space and hoping to find something that might prove they were not alone in the universe. Most of the signals were just background noise from distant stars, but today something was different. The signal came in strong and clear on a frequency that human technology should not have been able to detect. Lisa called Danny Clark from Communications to help her decode the transmission. Danny was young but very good with languages and computer codes. Together they worked for hours trying to understand what they were hearing. The message was not meant for human ears. Lisa and Danny discovered that it came from something called the Galactic Confederation, which was made up of 12 different alien species. These aliens had been ruling this part of space for thousands of years, and humans had never known they existed. The message was urgent, and it was about war. Jake came down to the lab when Lisa called him. She played the decoded message, and his face went white as he listened. The aliens were preparing for total war against something they called the Void Swarm. This enemy was described as a hive mind that ate entire star systems and left nothing behind. The Confederation was mobilizing every ship and soldier they had to fight this threat. What made Jake angry was the part about primitive species. The message included specific orders about humans and other young races. All primitive species were to be moved to safe zones during the war. The aliens planned to relocate human colonies like they were moving cattle. They would put humans in camps on distant worlds while the civilized races handled the real fighting. Danny found more transmissions over the next few days. The aliens talked about humans like they were children who needed protection. They said humans were too violent and too unpredictable to help in galactic warfare. One alien commander called human military tactics crude tribal warfare that would only get in the way of proper strategy. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster ran the ship's computer systems, and he was very good at analyzing data. Ryan studied all the alien messages and found something disturbing in their evacuation plans. The Confederation was not just planning to move humans to safety, they were planning to take control of human colonies and treat Earth's people like refugees who had no say in their own fate. Jake called a meeting with his senior officers. Lisa brought her analysis of the alien technology, and Ryan shared his concerns about the evacuation plans. Danny had intercepted more messages that showed alien ships were already moving toward human space. The Confederation was not asking for permission to relocate humanity. They were simply going to do it. The crew voted on what to do next. They could return to Earth immediately and warn the government about the aliens. They could try to make contact with the Confederation and offer to help in the war. Or they could stay hidden and gather more intelligence about what was really happening out there. Jake made the decision that would change everything. The Horizon's Edge would shadow the alien fleets and watch how they fought this war. They would learn everything they could about both the Confederation and the Void Swarm. Most importantly, they would not let the aliens treat humanity like helpless children who needed to be saved. Ryan began modifying the ship's systems to avoid alien detection. Lisa started a detailed study of Confederation military communications. Danny worked on improving their ability to intercept and decode alien messages. The entire crew understood that they were taking a huge risk, but they also knew it was the right thing to do. Over the following weeks, they watched alien evacuation ships approach human colonies in distant systems. The ships were massive and beautiful, but they carried a message that made Jake's blood boil. Humanity was not invited to participate in galactic civilization. They were just another primitive species to be managed and protected by their betters. Jake, recorded a message to send back to Earth through encrypted channels. He told the government everything they had learned about the aliens and their plans. He warned that first contact was coming soon, and it would not be the friendly meeting that humans had always imagined. The aliens saw humans as children, and they planned to treat them that way. The message ended with words that would be remembered for generations. Jake looked directly into the camera and said that humans were not children and they would not hide while others fought for the galaxy. The Horizon's Edge would continue its mission, and Earth needed to prepare for what was coming. Humanity had been excluded from a war that threatened all life in the galaxy, but they were going to join it anyway. 3 weeks after Jake Morrison sent his warning to Earth, the aliens finally made official first contact with humanity. Ambassador Zethkar of the Etherian Empire arrived at Earth with a fleet of ships that gleamed like crystals in the sunlight. The alien vessels were beautiful and clearly very advanced, but Admiral Patricia Stone was not impressed by their show of force. Stone commanded Earth Defense Command, and she had been preparing for this moment ever since Morrison's message arrived. The Admiral was a tough woman who had spent her career planning for threats that might never come. Now she faced the biggest threat humanity had ever encountered, and she was ready for it. The meeting took place aboard the diplomatic station New Geneva, which orbited Earth like a small moon. Zethkar was a tall being made of what looked like living crystal, and he spoke through a device that translated his words into perfect English. The ambassador seemed confident that humans would be impressed by alien technology and grateful for alien protection. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat beside Admiral Stone during the first meeting. Elena was Earth's best expert on how different minds worked, and she could read people very well. She watched Zethkar carefully as he explained the Confederation's generous offer to protect humanity during the coming war. The ambassador spoke like he was talking to children who needed things explained. In simple terms, he told Stone that humans would be relocated to safe worlds far from the fighting. These camps would have everything humans needed to survive until the war was over. Zethkar made it sound like the aliens were doing humanity a great favor by taking them away from their homes. Stone listened patiently while the ambassador described how the Confederation would handle the war against the Void Swarm. He explained that civilized species had been fighting galactic conflicts for thousands of years using proper military tactics and advanced weapons. The aliens had codes of honor and rules of engagement that primitive species like humans could never understand. When Zethkar finished his speech, Stone activated a wall screen and showed him classified footage from the Horizon's Edge. Morrison's ship had been watching Confederation forces fight the swarm for weeks, and the results were not impressive. The alien fleets fought in neat formations using energy weapons and predictable strategies that looked more like a parade than a real battle. Elena noticed how Zethkar's crystal features changed color when he saw the footage. The ambassador was clearly surprised that humans had been spying on Confederation military operations. Stone calmly explained that human ships had been observing alien tactics and they were not confident in Confederation abilities. The footage showed 3 different battles where Confederation forces had been defeated by the Void Swarm. The aliens fought with perfect coordination and beautiful formations, but they lost every engagement. Their energy weapons seemed powerful, but the swarm adapted to them quickly. Their tactics were elegant but predictable. Their strategies followed ancient patterns that any enemy could learn to counter. Stone paused the footage on an image of a destroyed Confederation fleet drifting among the wreckage of a mining colony. She told Zethkar that 3 alien worlds had already fallen to the swarm, and more defeats were coming. The ambassador's confident attitude began to crack as he realized that humans knew more about the war than he had expected. Elena spoke up for the first time and asked Zethkar about human military capabilities. The ambassador's crystal body shifted to a brighter color, which seemed to indicate amusement. He explained that humans were still fighting tribal wars among themselves, using primitive kinetic weapons and crude explosives. Human military doctrine was based on chaos and violence rather than civilized strategy. Stone made a counteroffer that shocked the ambassador. Instead of accepting evacuation, humanity wanted to join the war as equal partners. Earth had weapons and tactics that might be effective against an enemy that could adapt to conventional alien warfare. Humans were willing to fight and die alongside. The Confederation forces. Zethkar's response made Elena's blood boil. The ambassador explained that human weapons were thousands of years behind alien technology, and human tactics were nothing more than organized barbarism. He said that humans had never faced an enemy like the Void Swarm, and they would only get in the way of real soldiers. The very idea of humans participating in galactic warfare was absurd. The ambassador continued his speech about human limitations with growing condescension. He pointed out that humans still used chemical propulsion for space travel and nuclear weapons for destruction. Their military thinking was based on ancient concepts like total war and acceptable casualties that civilized species had abandoned long ago. Humans were simply too primitive and violent to be trusted with galactic security. Stone's patience finally ran out when Zethkar suggested that human aggression was proof of their inferior evolution. The Admiral stood up and activated another screen that showed Earth's hidden defense network. Hundreds of weapon platforms throughout the solar system came online and targeted the alien fleet. The ambassador's ship was surrounded by enough firepower to destroy his entire diplomatic mission. Elena watched Zethkar's crystal body turn darker as he realized that humans had been preparing for this meeting very carefully. Stone explained that Earth had been building secret weapons and defense systems for decades. If the aliens wanted to force humanity into evacuation camps, they would have to fight for every human colony and pay a price that would weaken them against the real enemy. The Admiral gave Zethkar one solar day to consider humanity's offer of military alliance. If the Confederation refused, then humans would defend themselves against both the aliens and the swarm. Stone made it clear that humanity would not go quietly into alien camps, no matter how advanced the technology used against them. As the ambassador prepared to leave, he delivered his own ultimatum. Humanity had one rotation of their planet to accept evacuation or face forced relocation. The Confederation had the power to move humans with or without their cooperation. Zethkar warned that resistance would only lead to unnecessary casualties, among a species too young to understand galactic realities. After the alien ships departed, Stone turned to her staff and gave orders that would change the course of galactic history. All hidden defense platforms were to remain active and ready for battle. Contact was to be made with Morrison and every other human ship in deep space. It was time to show the galaxy what human warfare really looked like when pushed into a corner. The Void Swarm attacked Earth's solar system 3 days before the Confederation had predicted they would arrive. Commander Alex Turner was running routine patrol flights from Luna Base when space itself seemed to tear open and massive dark ships poured through like insects from a broken nest. The alien hive fleet immediately began scanning Earth's electromagnetic signatures and mapping human defensive positions with terrifying efficiency. Turner commanded the first squadron of human fighters to respond to the invasion. His pilots flew the new Raptor-class interceptors that had been designed specifically for this moment. Unlike the beautiful energy weapons that Confederation forces preferred, human ships were loaded with kinetic cannons, plasma guns, and nuclear warheads that could crack a small moon in half. The swarm organisms had evolved over millions of years to absorb and redirect the energy weapons that civilized species used in warfare. Their black hulls could drink in laser fire and particle beams, then spit that same energy back at their attackers. The hive mind had conquered dozens of advanced alien civilizations by turning their own weapons against them. But the swarm had never encountered an enemy that still used what the galaxy considered primitive ballistic weapons. Turner's first missile strike caught the alien creatures completely off guard. Nuclear warheads detonated against swarm hulls that had no defense against simple explosive force. The hive ships that had seemed invincible against Confederation energy weapons began to crack and burn under human firepower. Captain Morrison's Horizon's Edge was still monitoring Confederation communications when the attack began. He watched. Alien commanders panic as their evacuation plans fell apart, and their military doctrine proved useless against an enemy that had arrived early. Morrison tried to coordinate between human and alien forces, but the Confederation fleet refused to work with primitive human ships. War Master Kelvon of the Dominion species commanded the alien fleet defending Earth's system. He was a proud military leader who had studied galactic warfare for centuries and won dozens of battles against conventional enemies. Kelvon transmitted angry messages to human forces, telling them to stand aside while proper soldiers handled the invasion. The War Master's attitude changed quickly when Turner's squadron destroyed 3 swarm cruisers in the first 10 minutes of combat. The human pilots used coordinated missile strikes and tactical nuclear weapons in ways that made no sense to alien military thinking. They accepted casualties to ensure target destruction and operated in radiation fields that would kill most organic life forms. Dr. Sarah Kim monitored the battle from Earth's command center and made observations that would change galactic military theory forever. The swarm's adaptation process required time to analyze new threats and develop countermeasures. Human unpredictability gave them a crucial advantage because the hive mind could not predict what humans would do next. Every human innovation bought precious time before the enemy could adapt to it. Turner's pilots switched between different weapon types and attack patterns with no logical sequence. They used chemical explosives, then nuclear warheads, then kinetic penetrators in combinations that confused the swarm's learning algorithms. The hive mind kept trying to find patterns that did not exist. Admiral Stone activated Project Cerberus when swarm reinforcements began pouring into the solar system. Hundreds of hidden nuclear platforms throughout the asteroid belt came online and began firing automatically. The resulting chain of explosions created a debris field that devastated the swarm's rear formations, while human ships continued operating normally in the chaos. The human defense network had been designed to function in the kind of radioactive debris field that would disable most alien technology. Earth's ships used hardened electronics and redundant systems that could survive electromagnetic pulses and radiation bombardment. The beautiful Confederation vessels with their elegant energy systems began failing as space filled with nuclear fire. War Master Kelvon watched his orderly battle plan dissolve into magnificent chaos as human forces turned the solar system into a radioactive war zone. His ships were designed for clean, precise combat between civilized opponents. They could not function in the kind of environment that humans created naturally when they fought for their lives. The swarm hive mind had never encountered enemies willing to destroy their own territory to deny it to invaders. Human commanders detonated mining platforms, space stations, and even small asteroids to create obstacles and hazards that disrupted alien formations. They seemed to prefer fighting in ruins and wreckage rather than open space. Turner led his surviving pilots in a final desperate assault on the largest swarm hive ship that was trying to reach Earth itself. The massive organism had adapted to most human weapons, but Turner had saved one surprise for the end. His squadron carried experimental fusion bombs that had never been tested in combat, but promised devastating results. The human pilots flew directly into the swarm ship's defensive grid and detonated their weapons inside the creature's hull. The fusion explosions tore through organic armor that could deflect energy weapons and created firestorms that consumed the hive mind's neural networks. The massive ship began to die from the inside as its own biology turned against it. Kelvon finally requested human tactical assistance when he realized that his conventional strategies were failing against an unconventional enemy. The War Masters. Pride had cost him half his fleet, but he was practical enough to recognize superior results when he saw them. Human methods were crude and violent, but they worked against an enemy that conventional tactics could not touch. Morrison's horizons. Edge became the coordination point between human and alien forces as both species learned to fight together. The Confederation commanders struggled to understand human tactical thinking, while human officers tried to explain concepts like acceptable losses and total war to aliens who had never fought for their very survival. The battle for Earth's solar system ended with the swarm in retreat, but both sides knew this was only the beginning. The hive mind had learned valuable lessons about human capabilities and would adapt its strategies accordingly. But humans had proven that their primitive weapons and chaotic tactics could hurt an enemy that advanced alien technology could not touch. As damaged ships limped back to base and casualty reports flooded the communications networks, one thing became clear to everyone involved. The galaxy's civilized races had been fighting the wrong kind of war against the Void Swarm, and humanity had just shown them a better way to kill their enemies. General Marcus Webb stood before the Confederation War Council and presented analysis that would shatter everything the aliens thought they knew about military strategy. Webb was Earth's most experienced commander, and he had spent his career studying how humans won wars against superior enemies. Now he faced a room full of alien military leaders who needed to learn some uncomfortable truths about warfare. The Confederation species fought what humans called gentlemen's wars. They followed ancient codes of military honor that minimized civilian casualties and preserved infrastructure for future use. Their battles resembled elaborate duels between civilized opponents who respected each other's capabilities and fought according to established rules. The aliens treated war like a chess match with predictable moves and logical outcomes. Webb explained that the Void Swarm had consumed dozens of these civilized species precisely because their military thinking was so predictable. The hive mind learned to exploit alien honor codes and tactical patterns. Every Confederation victory followed the same basic template, and the swarm adapted to counter it. The aliens were losing because they fought the same war over and over again. Humans fought dirty wars. Colonel Amy Chen proved this during the defense of Kepler Station, which was a critical supply depot that both sides needed to control. When swarm forces surrounded the station using their standard encirclement pattern, Chen did not follow alien doctrine by attempting to break through their lines. Instead, she detonated the station's fusion reactor and created an artificial star that vaporized everything within 50,000 kilometers. The alien commanders watching the battle were horrified by Chen's decision to destroy valuable infrastructure rather than lose it to the enemy. But the swarm hive mind was completely confused by this action because it violated every logical pattern they had learned from fighting civilized species. The organisms had evolved to preserve conquered resources and could not understand enemies, willing to deny those resources through destruction. Captain Morrison introduced the concept of chaos multiplication during the next phase of combined operations. His ship led mixed fleets in attack patterns that defied all military logic and made alien commanders physically sick to watch. Human forces would strike soft targets while ignoring strategic positions retreat when they were winning and advance, when they appeared to be losing. Dr. Rodriguez provided the scientific framework for understanding why human military tactics were so effective against the swarm. Where other species had evolved cooperation through peaceful civilization, humans had evolved it through constant competition and warfare. Earth's history of endless conflict had produced minds capable of rapid innovation under extreme stress. What aliens saw as violent instability was actually evolutionary optimization for survival in chaotic environments. Human brains were designed by millions of years of warfare to find creative solutions when conventional thinking failed. The very traits that made humans seem primitive to civilized species made them uniquely suited to fight an enemy that learned to counter logical strategies. War Master Kelvon struggled to adapt his forces to human methods during joint operations. His officers had trained for decades to execute precise maneuvers with perfect coordination, but human tactics required them to improvise and think creatively under fire. The aliens found it difficult to abandon the military doctrine that had served them for centuries. Lieutenant Jake Foster tried to explain human tactical thinking to his Etherian counterpart during a planning session for the next major offensive. Foster pointed out that aliens fought to win clean battles with minimal losses, while humans fought to win dirty wars with acceptable casualties. Both approaches had their place, but against an enemy like the Swarm, dirty tactics were more effective than clean ones. The breakthrough came when Dr. Kim developed weapons that changed their properties randomly during combat. These chaos rounds would shift between different materials, energy signatures, and behavioral patterns while in flight. The Swarm's adaptation process, which had evolved to counter consistent threats, failed completely when faced with weapons that refused to remain the same. Prime Admiral Nexus of the Synthetic Collective was the most logical member of the War Council and the most resistant to human methods. The artificial intelligence had calculated optimal strategies for every possible scenario, but human tactics operated outside all known parameters. Nexus could not predict what humans would do because humans themselves did not know until they did it. The turning point came during the liberation of the agricultural world Harvest Moon, where traditional Confederation forces had been defeated 3 times using conventional tactics. Webb proposed an assault that violated every principle of military science by splitting forces, randomly attacking multiple targets simultaneously, and changing objectives mid-battle based on enemy reactions. Colonel Chen led the ground assault. With mixed human and alien forces, using improvised weapons and guerrilla tactics that drove the hive mind into decision paralysis. The swarm organisms were designed to counter logical military progression, but they could not process enemies who operated according to instinct, emotion, and creative chaos rather than rational planning. The aliens watched in amazement as human forces treated established military doctrine like suggestions rather than laws. Sergeant Major Kate Sullivan's troops used psychological warfare against a hive mind that had no individual psychology to attack. They created false communications, confused sensor readings, and phantom targets that made the swarm waste resources, fighting enemies that did not exist. War Master Kelvon became humanity's strongest advocate after watching the results of combined operations. He reported to the Confederation Council that humans did not fight like soldiers following orders, but like natural disasters following instinct. They were impossible to predict, devastating to oppose, and utterly without regard for conventional limitations or acceptable behavior. The final test came at the fortress world of Terminus Gate, where the Swarm had established their primary staging area for galactic expansion. Confederation forces had attempted to assault the planet 4 times using standard siege warfare, but the hive mind's defenses were too strong for conventional attacks. Webb proposed something that horrified every alien commander present. Instead of a massive frontal assault, Webb wanted to infiltrate the planet with small teams carrying nuclear devices. The plan violated every alien concept of honorable warfare and tactical sense, but its very impossibility made it effective. The Swarm had evolved to counter logical military strategies, not suicide missions, that made no rational sense. The Confederation War Council faced an uncomfortable choice between their military traditions and practical necessity. Despite superior technology and thousands of years of experience, they were losing to an enemy that humanity could defeat using inferior weapons and chaotic tactics. The vote was close, but survival instinct overcame military pride. When the final tally was announced, humans were granted full partnership in galactic military operations with joint command authority over all combined forces. The galaxy's civilized races had accepted that their civilized approach to warfare was a luxury they could no longer afford against an enemy that understood only destruction and adaptation. Operation Wildfire began with the largest combined fleet in galactic history, launching from staging areas throughout Confederation space. Admiral Stone commanded from the human battleship Defiance while working alongside War Master Zephyr in a partnership that no one had thought possible just months earlier. The joint offensive would test whether human chaos tactics could work on a galactic scale against the full might of the Void Swarm. The first target was Carthax Prime, where traditional Confederation forces had been overwhelmed 6 months earlier. In a textbook defeat that followed every pattern the aliens expected from modern warfare, Commander Rick Hayes led the human assault group called Berserker Squadron, which consisted of fast attack ships loaded with experimental weapons designed specifically to confuse swarm adaptation protocols. Hayes had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment in the fleet, because he understood that human tactics only worked when humans were willing to take risks that terrified other species. His squadron carried the new chaos ammunition that Dr. Kim had developed, along with nuclear warheads, kinetic penetrators, and chemical explosives that would be used in random combinations to prevent enemy adaptation. The assault on Carthax Prime began exactly as alien military doctrine demanded, with reconnaissance flights and preliminary bombardments designed to soften enemy defenses. The swarm responded with standard countermeasures that had proven effective against civilized tactics. Then Hayes led his squadron in the most insane attack run that any alien commander had ever witnessed. Berserker Squadron ignored all strategic targets and instead attacked random points throughout the swarm defensive grid using weapons that changed properties mid-flight. Chaos rounds shifted between explosive armor-piercing and incendiary effects, while kinetic penetrators suddenly became electromagnetic pulse devices. The hive mind tried desperately to analyze these attacks and develop countermeasures, but the weapons refused to stay consistent long enough for adaptation. Captain Turner commanded the carrier Indomitable and demonstrated human tactical flexibility during the liberation of the mining world Xerion. When swarm forces began adapting to his initial attack pattern, Turner did not adjust his strategy like alien commanders would have done. Instead, he abandoned his plan entirely and switched to completely different weapons formations and objectives in the middle of combat. The aliens watched in horror and admiration as Turner's forces acted like they were fighting 3 separate battles simultaneously. Some ships used energy weapons while others fired kinetic rounds. Some squadrons attacked infrastructure while others targeted mobile units. Some formations followed standard tactics while others improvised based on immediate circumstances. The swarm could not develop countermeasures because there was no consistent pattern to counter. War Master Zephyr had initially been horrified by human disregard for proper military procedure, but he became their strongest advocate after seeing the results firsthand. He reported to his superiors that humans treated warfare like an art form rather than a science. They created beauty through destruction and achieved victory through methods that should have led to defeat according to every military manual ever written. Dr. Rodriguez established field research stations on liberated worlds to study how the swarm reacted to human tactics. Her teams discovered that the hive mind was essentially having mental breakdowns when faced with enemies that operated outside all logical frameworks. The organisms had evolved to process threats rationally, but humans were fundamentally irrational in their approach to combat. The breakthrough came when human psychologists realized they could weaponize confusion itself. Sergeant Major Kate Sullivan led ground forces that used improvisational theater and performance art as military tactics. Her troops would stage fake retreats, elaborate deceptions, and nonsensical maneuvers that drove the hive mind into decision paralysis because none of it made sense from a strategic perspective. Colonel Chen perfected the human art of acceptable losses during urban combat on the industrial world of New Foundry. When swarm forces occupied the planet's factory complexes, Chen's troops used demolition charges to collapse entire city blocks, rather than fight building to building. The aliens were appalled by the destruction, but the tactic worked because the swarm could not adapt to enemies who valued victory over preservation. The most dramatic demonstration of human tactical thinking occurred during the siege of the research Station Alpha 7, where Confederation scientists had been trapped for months. Instead of attempting a rescue operation, Chen decided to turn the entire station into a weapon by overloading its experimental power systems and using it as a massive bomb against nearby swarm forces. The plan required Chen to lead a volunteer mission into the heart of enemy territory, knowing that survival was unlikely. Her team fought through swarm defenses, using every dirty trick that humans had developed over centuries of warfare. They used poison gas explosive traps, psychological warfare, and suicide attacks that made no sense to an enemy that valued efficient resource utilization above everything else. Prime Admiral Nexus struggled to incorporate human methods into synthetic logic systems because human tactics were based on emotion, intuition, and creative chaos rather than rational calculation. The artificial intelligence had to develop entirely new programming to work alongside humans who made decisions based on factors that could not be quantified or predicted. The climax of Operation Wildfire came at the fortress world of Terminus Gate, where the Swarm had established their primary command center for coordinating attacks throughout the galaxy. General Webb's plan for taking the planet violated every principle of military science by using infiltration teams instead of siege warfare and nuclear weapons instead of precision strikes. The mission required mixed human and alien teams to penetrate swarm defenses that had been designed to stop conventional military assaults. The volunteers included species that had never worked together before and tactics that had never been attempted on such a scale. Success depended on everyone abandoning their military training and following human instincts into certain death. Colonel Chen led the infiltration personally because she understood that human tactics only worked when humans were willing to accept the ultimate sacrifice. Her teams moved through enemy territory using stealth chaos and pure determination to reach their objectives. They carried nuclear devices that would sever the hive mind's communication network across multiple star systems if detonated simultaneously. The final assault on Terminus Gate combined everything that humans had learned about fighting the Void. Swarm. Multiple teams attacked different targets using different methods with no coordination or logical sequence. Some teams used stealth while others created massive diversions. Some carried conventional weapons, while others relied on improvised explosives. The Swarm could not predict or counter attacks that followed no pattern except human creativity. When the nuclear devices detonated across Terminus Gate, the resulting chain reaction did more than destroy a single world. It created a cascade failure in the Swarm's communication network that left isolated hive ships throughout the galaxy, confused and unable to coordinate with each other. The hive mind that had seemed invincible was suddenly blind, deaf, and helpless against enemies it could no longer understand or predict. The final battle against the Void Swarm took place at the edge of the galaxy, where the surviving hive ships attempted to retreat into dark space beyond the reach of any pursuit. Admiral Stone commanded the combined fleet from her flagship and faced a decision that would define humanity's place in galactic civilization for generations to come. The enemy was broken and fleeing, but they were not yet destroyed completely. War Master Zephyr advocated for total pursuit and annihilation of every remaining swarm organism to ensure they could never threaten civilized space again. His logic was sound from a military perspective because allowing any hive ships to escape would leave the possibility of future attacks. The Confederation had lost too much to risk letting their enemy survive even in exile. But Stone had a different vision for ending the war. Instead of hunting down the fleeing swarm ships, she ordered the construction of what she called a chaos barrier along the galactic rim. This defensive network would use randomized human-designed weapons to prevent any future swarm incursion while allowing the surviving organisms to retreat into empty space where they could no longer threaten anyone. The barrier consisted of automated defense platforms that operated according to human tactical principles rather than alien logic. Each platform carried different weapons that changed randomly and fired according to patterns that no enemy could predict or adapt to. The swarm hive mind would never be able to learn how to counter defenses that refused to remain consistent. Dr. Rodriguez supported Stone's decision for psychological reasons that the alien commanders struggled to understand. She explained that completely destroying the swarm would eliminate the galaxy's greatest teacher about the dangers of predictable thinking. Future enemies would evolve, and the Confederation needed to remember the lessons that humans had taught them about creative warfare. Captain Morrison oversaw the barrier construction from his ship while coordinating with alien engineers who were still amazed by human approaches to military technology. The platforms incorporated Confederation energy systems with human chaos programming to create weapons that were both advanced and unpredictable. It was a perfect fusion of alien precision and human creativity. The aftermath of the war reshaped galactic civilization in ways that no one had anticipated. The old Council of 12 became the Council of 13, with humanity granted full membership and significant influence over military policy. Earth's representatives brought more than just tactical innovations to the galactic community. They brought a fundamental shift in how civilized species thought about conflict and survival. General Webb established the Institute for Asymmetric Warfare, where alien officers learned human tactical thinking while human commanders studied Confederation technology. The exchange program created a new generation of military leaders who understood that effective strategy required both logical planning and creative chaos. War was too important to be left entirely to either approach. Admiral Stone was promoted to Supreme Allied Commander with authority over all Confederation military forces. Her first order was to integrate human tactical principles into standard alien military doctrine while preserving the technological advantages that each species brought to combined operations. The result was a military philosophy that no enemy could fully predict or counter. Dr. Kim continued developing chaos weapons that incorporated alien technology with human unpredictability. Her research teams created ammunition that could shift between energy and kinetic effects defensive systems that changed their properties randomly, and communication networks that operated according to human intuition rather than logical protocols. The galaxy's military technology became as chaotic and effective as human thinking. The signing of the Terran Accords took place 1 year after the end of the Swarm War in a ceremony that celebrated humanity's transition from excluded primitives to essential partners. Ambassador Zethkar delivered a speech that acknowledged how wrong the Confederation had been about human capabilities and potential contributions to galactic civilization. The ambassador admitted that the aliens had sought to preserve humanity from the dangers of war, but instead, humans had preserved everyone by embracing those very dangers that civilized species feared. He acknowledged that human willingness to fight dirty had saved the galaxy from an enemy that clean tactics could not defeat. The Confederation owed its survival to a species they had dismissed as too primitive to matter. General Webb addressed the assembled delegates with his own perspective on humanity's role in galactic affairs. He pointed out that the aliens had invited humans to hide while they fought a war they could not win. Instead, humans had shown up uninvited and helped fight a war that could not be lost. That was what humans did best. They appeared where they were not expected and made themselves indispensable through sheer determination. Captain Turner commanded one of the new mixed crews that departed for the galactic frontier carrying chaos ammunition and impossible tactics to face whatever threats awaited in the unknown regions. These ships represented the future of galactic exploration and defense. They combined alien technology with human unpredictability to create something greater than either species could achieve alone. The final scene showed humanity's transformation from excluded observers to essential participants in galactic civilization. Human colonies spread throughout Confederation space, bringing their chaotic energy and creative solutions to problems that had puzzled alien minds for millennia. They were no longer the primitive species that needed protection, but the innovative partners that everyone wanted to work with. Morrison retired from active duty, but continued serving as an advisor to joint human-alien missions. His ship, the Horizon's Edge, had started the war as an unauthorized spy vessel, but ended it as the symbol of human determination to participate in galactic affairs, regardless of official invitation. The ship was preserved as a monument to the principle that sometimes the best way to join a fight is to show up uninvited. The galaxy learned that humans do not ask permission to save the universe. They simply identify what needs to be done and do it with whatever resources they can gather and whatever allies they can convince to join them. The bill for their services comes later in the form of permanent membership in whatever civilization they choose to protect. Stone's final report to Earth described a galaxy that had been fundamentally changed by human participation in the Swarm War. The Confederation was no longer a collection of separate species following ancient protocols, but a unified community learning to think creatively about challenges that required more than logical solutions. Humanity had taught the galaxy to embrace chaos as a tool for survival and growth. The war that humans were not invited to join became the war that they ended through methods that no one else could have imagined. Their victory proved that sometimes the most primitive approaches are actually the most advanced solutions to problems that conventional thinking cannot solve. The galaxy was safer because humans had refused to accept exclusion from its defense.